Hello, this is my cultural aspects of learning presentation on Islam and Arabic speaking children in the elementary school. Abbas was a young second grader in my classroom last year. When we began the school year, he had just arrived from Iraq. Come to find out, however, he came from Iraq by way of Turkey, Greece, Italy, and a few other countries. Throughout his changing early life, the consistent things remained: his family and his culture. He arrived in my classroom unfamiliar with the school, the language, and the culture. What was I going to do to support this little boy and to teach him? In my research, I read a lot on developing cultural competencies. Culturally competent teachers know how to tap into the diverse cultures of their students to make learning meaningful and comprehensible. In this way, students then are able to make sense of what is being taught, to utilize the new content, abilities, and attitudes in development of high levels of content area knowledge, citizenship skills, and critical thinking skills. It is essential for educators to acquire a clear understanding of one's own cultural orientation and biases. It involves taking personal responsibility for looking at one's cultural upbringing and reflecting on the values and beliefs an individual acquired through his or her upbringing. Lack of cultural self-awareness prohibits educators from responding in positive and affirming ways to all students. Here is a continuum of where teachers should identify their placement. To the left, we have cultural destructiveness moving through to cultural incapacity, cultural blindness, cultural sensitivity, cultural competence, and cultural proficiency. The further right you move, the more supportive you are and affirming you are for your students, and you are able to respond to them in an appropriate manner to support their education. What should elementary teachers know about Arab students and Islam in the classroom? Teachers must not interpret these behaviors as misbehaviors, as they are part of the culture. Interesting things I found out is Muslims do not eat pork products. Muslims fast for the entire month of Ramadan. Muslims are expected to dress modestly and cover much of their bodies. Muslims pray 5 times a day. Physical touch between women and unrelated males is not permitted. Eye contact between men and women should be avoided. A lot of these are interesting facts and will have an impact on the child in the classroom. For example, Muslims fasting for the entire month of Ramadan. Now, this is observed primarily when students hit puberty, but even at the primary school level, some families do require their children to follow along in the traditions. If a child is fasting for the entire day until the sun sets, they're going to be hungry, tired, they may get pale, they may feel faint, and teachers need to be aware of these effects of fasting. Muslims pray 5 times a day is another interesting fact, and again, this is held to students who are around the age of puberty, but some families do require their children to follow in these cultural traditions. So it would be an important thing to know and to have a safe place in the classroom where students would be able to pray, because at least 2 of those 5 times will happen during the school day. The last 2 points of physical touch and eye contact, it is very important to understand this, because teachers, we always want children to make eye contact with us, but if young boys are not allowed to make eye contact with women, then that is something that is not a misbehavior. It is simply a cultural tradition. Once cultural respect is understood and established between the teacher and students, then a path for learning has been cleared. When I began researching background information concerning the culture and the four domains of literacy, I was very surprised by a lot of what I learned. In the reading domain, letter forms take on a different shape in Arabic based on the placement in the word. So, if a letter is placed at the beginning of the word, it might have a different shape than the same letter being placed towards the middle or end of a word. Also, Arabic is written from right to left as opposed to left to right in English. Short vowels are situated on the page as marks attached to consonants. They're written in works for children. They're written out as short vowels, but not in adult works of text. Long vowels are expressed in letters, so there's a difference between the short and long vowel on the page. Noun sentences do not contain a verb, so instead of saying God is great, it would read God great. Arabic has no verb for to have and to be, so this impacts the writing and the comprehension also of a student who's reading. And the last thing under reading is all Arabic countries have two forms of Arabic. There's formal, which is the modern standard Arabic, and colloquial, which is the non-standard Arabic. This non-standard form also varies from nation to nation. In the writing domain, many letters are similarly shaped, which makes the transition to English writing challenging. One letter equals one phoneme as opposed to our digraphs, for example, CH, TH, SH, and WH, which have two letters that equal that one phoneme. Students usually are inconsistent with their readings of short vowels, which can lead to inconsistent writing of short vowels and inconsistent writing of these words that contain short vowels. Students must adapt to the directionality change, and sometimes they will often omit small verbs such as is, be, and has because Arabic has no form of these verbs. Speaking, once students establish a relationship with trust and friendships within the classroom, they're much more willing to speak and share individually and in small and whole group settings. It was suggested to pair a new English learner with a student speaking the same language. This isn't always a possibility here in Maine because our EL numbers are lower than in other parts of the country. So if this is not a possibility, we'd partner an English learner with a calm and nurturing student to be a peer mentor to converse with, sort of a buddy. Echo reading is an important strategy for the teacher and student to use together. When the teacher models the text at an appropriate rate and with intonation, the English learner will repeat the reading more accurately than when done as an independent read. This also promotes speaking skills, and they can practice their speaking skills after an appropriately modeled teacher. Listening. Students have excellent listening comprehension because the letter, word, and sentence print formations do not get in the way of the understanding. So when you are doing a read aloud with your students, they're understanding what you're reading as long as they're paying attention. They're able to recite back the beginning, middle, and end of a story, for example. When English learners listen to texts about subjects in their own countries or in areas they can connect to, they're more motivated and engaged in the material. And this also helps in establishing a good culture in the classroom because they feel a part of the community. I did a lot of research on culturally responsive teaching, a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. There are three dimensions of culturally relevant pedagogy. Number one, holding high academic expectations and offering appropriate support such as scaffolding. Number two, acting on cultural competence by reshaping the curriculum. Number three, building on students' knowledge and establishing relationships with students and their homes. The First tenet of this framework is to hold high academic expectations and offer appropriate support such as scaffolding. Palmer gave a lot of ideas and suggestions for how to scaffold the learning for our English learning students. Enlist the help of a translator if available. At the minimum, translate texts and directions through Google Translate. You also want to offer children's literature in an Arabic version. Offer directions for math assessments in Arabic. Whatever you do, you want to try to meet the needs of the learner and where they are with their language and proficiency, while simultaneously immersing these students in the English language. They may understand how to do the math, but they may not understand the directions as they are written in English, so just translate them. Never thought of that before. Get parents involved in the academic and behavioral goals of their children. Expose students to as much social interaction as possible to encourage growth in the speaking and listening domains. Reading instructions for your students may require a high degree of phonological mediation because of the differences in the written languages of Arabic and English. Also, phonological mediation will have to occur when it comes to short vowels and those very basic CVC words. Number 2 is to act on cultural competence by reshaping the curriculum. So we want to start by acknowledging our own biases and move towards cultural proficiency. We want to understand that there's political and cultural bias within text that should be validated and open to accommodation, especially when we are assessing our students. Finally, we want to involve all students in the construction of knowledge, building on students' personal and cultural strengths, helping students examine the curriculum from multiple perspectives, using carried assessment practices that promote learning and make the culture of the classroom inclusive of all students. Finally, we want to build on students' knowledge and establish relationships with students in their homes. It's important to know about the lives and histories of our students, and we want to develop affirming views of students from diverse backgrounds. We want to demonstrate cultural caring and building a learning of community, establish communication across cultures in the classroom, promote equity and inclusiveness among students, and promote students' active construction of knowledge, and design instruction that builds on what our students already know while stretching them beyond the familiar. We want to respond to students as learners who already know a great deal and who have experiences, concepts, and languages that can be built on and expanded to help them learn even more. My conclusions. In my philosophy of teaching second graders, I always lean towards the social and emotional learning of my students as the number one priority. When researching the culture impact on a classroom, I was thankful to find so much information on culturally responsive teaching. I feel that the tenets of this framework align nicely with the philosophy I already have in place. If you have high expectations of your students and you mix those expectations with social and emotional support, then you will most likely have strong academic outcomes. Thank you.